My name is Miguel Figueroa. I'm the County Executive Officer. It's a pleasure to have all of you with us today. As the slogan of the summit reads, we're looking to unite, we're looking to unify as we address some of the important matters related to the Colorado River. As we start here today, we have a morning session leading us up to noon with some important discussions that will lead to all the stakeholders to be well informed, involved as we move forward with what's to come. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce to you the chairman of the Imperial County Board of Supervisors from District Number 1, Mr. Jesus Eduardo Escobar.
Good morning. Good job, Miguel. Those of you that know me, this is a little early for me. My buddy in crime, Mr. Mike Kelly, always teases me because I'm a few minutes late to Board of Supervisors meetings on Tuesdays. But with that, let's get a little serious. I'm going to show my age here. So on behalf of the County of Imperial, my fellow supervisors, and I'll name them by first name only. District 5, I'll go backwards, Ray. District 4, he's not here, is he? Ray, Ryan? Ryan. District 3, Mike. District 2, Luis, who's actually the instigator of this shindig. And yours truly. Our partners, Coalition of Labor, Agriculture, and Business, alias COLAB, Comité Cívico del Valle. Señor Olmedo, ¿por aquí anda? Otro que vino tarde. Okay, we'll move forward. And the Imperial Valley Vegetable Growers Association, thank you all for being here today at the 2022 Colorado River Summit. Water is the lifeline of our county. It nourishes the fruits and vegetables cultivated by our hard-working farm workers while supporting the economies surrounding our agricultural industry that allow many across our binational region to put food on their tables and provide families and individuals access to the sought-after American dream. Water also provides the residents' cities the ability to keep the grass green, the trees lush, to help alleviate the grueling summers. Not that bad, it's only what, 115 and 30% humidity, maybe 40? Alleviating our grueling summers that are getting hotter, that I do believe in. I'm not sure it's my age or if it's really getting hot. Getting hotter every year. Water will also be the bridge to the future of our county that can also foster new industries beyond agriculture. And obviously I'm talking about Lithium Valley. Water and our correct collective reliance on it within our harsh desert is something that needs to be discussed, but collectively protected. And that is what brings us here today together. We have all heard of the drought and water crisis and the impacts currently being felt across our great country. From the extremely low levels at Lake Mead and Lake Powell to the limitations being imposed on residential homes to groundwater wells going dry. However, one thing not being discussed at a local level in a forum like one here today is what the impacts will be to our Imperial County. A county that relies on water and a county that's already underserved, underprivileged, disadvantaged, and simply cannot afford any more negative impacts to our people, our economy, and our way of life. Although this came together in a very short amount of time, and I really mean that by very short amount of time, we felt it necessary to allow county residents and stakeholders the opportunity to hear from those across our county on what this crisis means to them, their organizations, and all of us. This event is intended to provide an open opportunity for our communities to engage in meaningful discussions to address the needs and requests to reduce water consumption, in light of the Colorado River shortage. Our goal is to build awareness, encourage engagement, and receive feedback from participants to develop a unified and informed idea and front on how to address the impacts of our water crisis. Because of the short time frames, people were pulling in 28-hour workdays, which doesn't exist, so I really want to thank a few people before I go on. And I want to name them literally by name. So first, credit where credit is due. This was a tag team effort, but Supervisor Luis Antonio Plancarte, District 2, thank you for, I just saw him, now I lost him. Thank you for your leadership in spearheading this effort. Our not-so-new CEO anymore, he's been here over 3 months now, Miguel Figueroa. Our Intergovernmental Relations Director, I finally got that right, Rebecca Terrazas Baxter. Our PIO, who's taking pictures somewhere, Gil Revelar. Clerk of the Board, I was going to name him by first name only, but they got pissed off, so Blanca Costa, Cynthia Medina, and Marilyn Denari. Thank you very much. And obviously to our IT dude, Mario Lopez. With that, I would also like to thank the Imperial County Office of Education for hosting us at this beautiful state-of-the-art facility, and they're hiding out in the back. You can sit down, don't worry about it. We're not going to steal your building, even though I wish I could. We are sincerely grateful for your generosity and support. And before I go into the Colorado River, I want to share with all those that our hope that today's summit will be defined by the conversations that we hold as a community, as local government, with industry and community stakeholders, as we all come together to address this vital issue, which is water. With that, I turn it back to Mr. Figueroa. Welcome, and thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Chairman Escobar. Now I would like to introduce two guests that are with us today. It's an honor for us to have them before us to hear their remarks. From the Bureau of Reclamation, we have Mr. Alan Butler. From the Colorado River Board of the State of California, we have Mr. Chris Harris.
Good morning, everyone. There we go. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all today. I think, if I understand correctly, Chris and I are going to take the opportunity to provide a bit of context on the overall drought in the Colorado River Basin. And so with that, I have a few slides that I would like to walk everyone through. If we could pull those up, please. And can I advance it? Okay. We will just get right into it. So I think, as many of you are aware, the last several decades have been a historically dry period in the Colorado River Basin. We've been in drought since the year 2000. The last 23 years is the driest 23-year period on record. Going back to 1906, it's also one of the driest years if we look back in the last 1,200 years. It's been historically dry, and that has had an impact on the two largest reservoirs in the country, Lake Powell and Lake Mead, which are shown in these two figures. Last year, water year 2021, was the second lowest inflow into Lake Powell since 1964. And this has led to a continued decline in the storage in both Lake Powell and Lake Mead. At the beginning of this week, both of the reservoirs are sitting at just 27% of capacity. That's elevation 35, 37 at Lake Powell, and elevation 1041 at Lake Mead. The 90% of the overall runoff in the Colorado River Basin is generated in upper basin snowpack. And this figure is showing the historical average snowpack accumulation in the black line. And then our snowpack that we had last year in red and this year in blue. And what this figure is showing, that by the peak of those snowpack accumulations from last year and this year being close to that black line in the back, is that we've been receiving about average or near average precipitation in the form of snowfall. However, that's not manifesting in runoff because of the dry, hot conditions we're experiencing basin-wide. The table shows what the forecasted runoff is going to be for this year. It's forecasted to be 58% of average runoff for the spring runoff period and 61% of average for the entire water year. So even though we're receiving 97% of average precipitation and snowfall, we're experiencing well below average runoff. And again, that's because of the hot, dry conditions that we've had over these last few years and few decades, and that trend is continuing. Just to put that runoff in context a little bit more, this figure shows the inflow into Lake Powell. Again, this is that upper basin runoff going back to 1964 when we built Lake Powell. And each blue bar represents the runoff for one of those years, and that very last bar is the green bar. That's the forecasted runoff for this year. Again, that's about 60% of average, and average is that horizontal black line. You can see that going back to 2000, there's only been about 5 above average years in the last 23 years. And the last 3 years have been well below average. You can see last year, 2019, 2020, and 2021, 2020, 2021, and 2022, all well below average. And that, again, has had a noticeable effect on the combined storage of Lake Powell and Lake Mead, which is what this next figure shows. Just to orient you to this figure, this is the combined storage in Lake Powell and Lake Mead. Again, this is going back to the 1960s. And what you can see is there around 2000, the reservoirs were very full. The stacked area of the blue and the gray shows that in 2000, we were at 92% of capacity. Then you can see that very sharp decline over the first 4 or 5 years of the drought. Those are the driest 4 or 5 years we've experienced in the Colorado River Basin, and we lost roughly half the storage in Lake Powell and Lake Mead in those 4 years. Since 2005 till 2019, the storage remained roughly, it didn't lose too much more. It was a declining trend, but we did not lose a lot between 2005 and 2019. But then you can see in those last 3 years, that very sharp decline where we've lost, again, about half the existing storage that we had. And so now we're sitting right there. We're projected to end this year at 24% of capacity. And if we have 2 more dry years, if we're to experience something like that 2001 to 2005 period, you can interpolate and see where we could be headed. That's where we're currently sitting. These next 2 figures are showing where we could be going. So we use different models to model where storage in Lake Powell and Lake Mead and other system reservoirs could be over the next 2 to 5 years. This figure shows the projected pool elevation at Lake Powell for the next 24 months. And there's dashed red, dashed green, and dashed blue lines that represent our 24-month study projections. These are the dashed green line is our most probable projection. That's important because it's the August most probable projection next month that will set the operating conditions at Lake Powell and Lake Mead for calendar and water years 2023. So that's of particular importance next month. And then the red dashed line, the blue dashed line, and all of those gray lines are just other possibilities of where we could end these next few years based on different assumptions for runoff in the next 2 years. And what this figure is showing is that we're very close to elevation 3490 at Lake Powell. Elevation 3490 at Lake Powell is where if we fall below that elevation, we're no longer able to generate electricity from Glen Canyon Dam. We also, at that elevation, because we cannot release water through the power plant, we have to release water through what's called the bypass tubes. And as the reservoir level continues to fall lower, the capacity of those bypass tubes declines, and we can run into issues where we can't release the full volume of water to the lower basin that's required under the existing law of the river. So that's a very critical elevation, both for energy and water supply, and we are approaching that elevation. This year we took action to help protect that elevation. We released 500,000 acre feet from Flaming Gorge Dam down to Lake Powell, and we also reduced the release from Lake Powell to Lake Mead by 480,000 acre feet. So that effectively put about 1 million acre feet extra water in Lake Powell for this year to help protect that elevation 3490. But when you look out over the next 2 years, you can see that red line, falls below that elevation 3490, and there's other gray lines that fall below it even earlier. And what that's indicating is that if we have particularly dry hydrology in this coming winter, that there's the possibility of falling below that elevation as early as summer of next year. Now moving downstream to Lake Mead, the figure is showing the same information. There's the most probable 24-month study projection shown as the green dashed line. Again, that'll be used next month to set the operating tier in the lower basin for next calendar year. And then the gray lines and red dashed line and blue dashed line provide a range of possibilities for where we could end these next few years. But across almost all of these different modeling projections, we're showing the potential for Lake Mead to continue to decline down below elevation 1025 as early as next summer, and even approaching 1,000 possibly by 2024. If we end 2023 below elevation 1025, then that would result in a level 3 shortage condition. The highest volume of required shortages and drought contingency plan contributions would go into effect if that were to be the case this time next year. So when we look at the projections going out beyond 2 years to 5 years, it does not seem to get much better, unfortunately. What we are illustrating here is a comparison of 2 different modeling projections from our February run and from our May run. And lots of things changed in the basin between February and May. One of those was that the forecasted runoff for this year declined by almost 1.3 million acre feet. But we also took those actions that I previously discussed to protect Lake Powell, so we kind of offset the decline in the forecast, so to speak. And what the figure on the left shows, which is Lake Powell, if you look at the bottom of the purple region or the bottom of the orange region, you can see that we delayed the potential to fall below 3490 out by several months. So back in February, we were showing that we could be falling below 3490 by as early as this November, and we've effectively delayed that earliest possibility out to summer of next year by taking those actions. But looking out beyond the next 2 years, the bottom end of these shaded regions and that dashed line shows that there's above a 10% chance that we could fall below 3490 in the next several years at Lake Powell. And at Lake Mead, What you see in that very first year is the effects of reducing Lake Powell's release this year. So that had a noticeable impact on the storage at Lake Mead. And that's illustrated by the difference between the purple cloud and the orange cloud in that first year. But going out beyond that, the trends continue. Again, the possibility of falling below 1025 as early as next year, as low as 1,000 the following year, and continuing to decline down towards elevation 950 is a possibility by 2026. And just as a reminder, elevation 895 at Lake Mead is dead pool. That's the elevation where there's no more storage that we can release through Hoover Dam. So luckily that's not quite showing there, but 950 is just a small 50 feet above that. This is the basic, or when looking at this, we started asking ourselves, what would it take to protect the elevations, the critical elevations at Lake Powell and Lake Mead? So what's the volume of water we would need to maintain particular elevations at Lake Powell and Lake Mead? And to do this, my next few slides get into what we're referring to as a protection volume analysis. So what volume of water does it take to protect the critical elevations at both Lake Powell and Lake Mead? So this protection volume analysis, I'll get into the details in a minute, but I'll start just by orienting you to this very first table. We don't know what the hydrology is going to be for these next 4 years. So we've analyzed a range of possible future runoff scenarios, and that's what the different rows in this table represent. So the first row would be, what if the next 4 years have above average runoff? And the next row is, what if the next 4 years have 80 to 95% of average runoff? The middle is, what if the next 4 years are 64 to 79% of average? And as a point of reference, the last 4 years would fall into this middle row. So we've been in this kind of high 60, low 70% of average runoff for the last 4 years. And then the next two rows, that 50 to 63% of average runoff, that would be where the worst 4-year period fell. So that 2001 to 2004 period would fall there. And then the less than 50% of average runoff, that would be worse than anything we've experienced in the last 100 years. And this table illustrates where Lake Mead could end these next 4 years in those 5 different kind of runoff scenarios. We've highlighted the orange as Mead ending below 1020, and we've highlighted in red when Lake Mead ends in 1000. And so you can see that in those, if we have runoff anywhere below 79% of average, we could be ending below 1020 and then below 1000. So again, we performed this protection volume analysis. So we wanted to look at what it would take to protect critical elevations at Lake Powell and Lake Mead. And we don't know precisely what those critical elevations are. So we've looked at 2 different sets of elevations. The first would be elevation 3525 at Powell and 1020 at Mead. And the second would be elevation 3500 at Powell and 1000 at Mead. And we wanted to quantify the total magnitude of water it would take to maintain the reservoirs at these elevations. And that's what's reported in the right side of this table. I'll just skip to that middle row, which is that runoff similar to what we've been experiencing over the last 4 years. And so in that case, it would take 2.1 million acre feet per year on average over the next 4 years to maintain Lake Powell at elevation 3525 and Lake Mead at elevation 1020, or 1.3 million acre feet a year to maintain those slightly lower elevations. And if we experienced hydrology worse than that, then those numbers increase. And you can see to protect the higher elevations, it could go up to 3.5 million acre feet a year on average, or 2.7 million acre feet a year on average to protect the lower levels. This analysis was quite simplistic. We're not saying who or where or how. We just wanted to quantify the magnitude of the problem. And so these are some pretty large volumes of water, to state the obvious. We To reiterate, we don't know what the runoff will be next year. We don't have that forecasting capability at this point, but we do know that the soils are very dry right now. Based on what I discussed at the beginning of the presentation, we need well above average precipitation and snowpack next year just to receive average runoff. So if we continue to receive average precipitation, we should continue to expect below average runoff. And if we have below average runoff, we need these protection volumes to help stabilize the system. And even if we're lucky enough that next year is a good year, we can quickly be back in this same position or worse in a year or two. So acting now is prudent. And then the final point I'd like to make before turning it over to Chris is that each year we fall short of protecting whatever elevations we all choose to protect, then we would need the volumes that you would need to stabilize the system just increase in the following year. And so with that, I think I'll turn it over to Chris.
Thanks, Alan. I'm Chris Harris. I'm the Executive Director of the Colorado River Board of California. It's a state agency that was created by statute in 1937 and is charged with protecting and ensuring California is able to maintain its Colorado River water and power resources. And we have a 10-person board. We have a chairman, Peter Nelson, who sits also on the board of the Coachella Valley Water District. And we're made up of both agricultural districts and municipal water districts in Southern California that use and rely very significantly on Colorado River water resources. A couple things I just wanted to mention. When Alan put up the protection volumes table and you had the two ranges of elevations, it's worth bearing in mind that the one elevation of Powell 3525 and Mead 1020 or 1025, and then the other set was Powell 3500 and Mead 1000. Powell 3500 is only 10 feet above the river outlet works, so there's no margin there at all. If the reservoir falls below that, then we're on the outlet works. We can't generate power. While California does not rely on Colorado River Storage Project hydroelectric energy, it is a backstop. When we have energy issues in California, they do spin up reserves at Glen Canyon Dam. So it's important from that perspective as well. Hoover Dam is also the black start unit for Palo Verde Nuclear Generating Station outside of Phoenix. So you don't want to lose that generation capacity there either. It's a national security interest. But most importantly, for all of you in this valley, or the Palo Verde Valley, or the Yuma Valley, you're directly tied to the Colorado River. You guys know that. You've known that all the time. There have been people living here in the Imperial Valley. You guys were the genesis for the construction of Hoover Dam and Lake Mead and the All-American Canal. It really, the mojo came out of the Imperial Valley for that. So California's relationship to the Colorado River is critical going forward. I can't emphasize that enough. And the Imperial Valley has played a prominent role in California's stake in the Colorado River from the very beginning. This is why we have senior water rights in this state, because California began developing the water resources of the Colorado River long before many of the other basin states did. And the emphasis, the incentive for California to enter into the 1922 Colorado River Compact was to get ultimately congressional authorization for the construction of Hoover Dam, Imperial Dam, and the All-American Canal. So it's always kind of worth keeping that in context and the role that the Imperial Valley and the Imperial Irrigation District play as we move forward into these incredibly challenging times. And I really want to emphasize the information that Alan provided here, especially this sort of snapshot of both the last 60, 70, 80 years now since Glen Canyon Dam was constructed in the early 1960s and the gates closed and we began to fill Lake Powell. That provided a buffer for Mead. You now had a quasi-reliable supply coming down each year. We are now in a place where we're losing that reliability for Lake Mead's water supply. And ultimately, then, that affects the reliability and certainty that the water users in both the lower basin and in Mexico derive from Lake Mead storage. So it's really important that we, as a Colorado River basin, including Mexico, and we in California, work diligently and quickly to address the declining conditions at both Lakes Powell and Mead. This has to be done. The alternative is unbearable from my perspective. I mean, honestly, what does the Imperial Valley do without a viable Lake Mead? So I think it's incumbent upon all of us to work together. And this can't be borne solely by water users in Arizona, California, and Mexico. It has to be a shared obligation and responsibility by all of us. Climate change, it's Mother Nature. It doesn't show favoritism to any one user or hit any one user more hard. It's broad. It's across the West. The Rio Grande Basin is in the same situation we're in. The Klamath Basin, the great Central Valley of California. Central Valley Project and State Water Project essentially got zero allocation this year. And it's probably on track, if the hydrology remains poor, for similar allocations next year. So this is a statewide situation in California. It's very serious. And in the Colorado River Basin, it is a very serious situation that we're grappling with. Now, we have been moving fast. There are interstate discussions and negotiations going on even as we speak right now. I'm part of those. All of the California's Colorado River water users are part of those discussions. We are working very closely with the Bureau of Reclamation and the Department of the Interior in doing what we can to begin to stabilize these two very large reservoirs. You look at a system that's made up of 60 million acre feet, and 50 million acre feet of that system is in Lakes Powell and Mead, those two big reservoirs. So it's really incumbent upon all of us to work together and come up with a consensus-based agreement that addresses local and community impacts, including here in the Imperial Valley, the Salton Sea. The Imperial Valley has been a part of the solution to the Colorado River Basin for a long time. In the recent past, many of you are aware of what the Imperial Irrigation District does now with the Quantification Settlement Agreement, the nation's largest transfers from the ag sector to the M&I sector. What that did was it allowed California to reduce its use of Colorado River water from 5.2 million acre feet down to its basic mainstream apportionment of 4.4. And we'll never be in a situation, at least not for the foreseeable future, where there will be surplus supplies available to California, even though we have a right to it. They just aren't there, as you saw from Alan's presentation. So we have got to live within our basic mainstream apportionment, and probably for some period of time, perhaps less than that. We're going to have to do some additional conservation on top of what is being done through the QSA and the other conservation transfer programs in other ag districts in the Colorado region in California. Arizona's in the same position. They have a junior priority to California's 4.4. And so their reductions, their water use reductions are going to be large, and it will be painful. But all of us are going to have to do this in order to begin to, one, stabilize the reservoir system and hopefully slow the rate of decline, and two, begin to rebuild some storage so that we can regain some of that buffer that we had in the reservoir system. When I first started working on Colorado River issues, it was in the very early 1990s, and I saw the reservoir system at the end of the 90s when it was virtually full. And it has been on a steady rate of decline. And there's kind of two things going on here too. One, we have this sort of interim period. Alan referred to 2023 through 2026. We're really focused on this 4-year period to try and slow the rate of decline of the two reservoirs by taking basin-wide actions, conservation, augmentation, operational adjustments that reclamation can do under its own authorities, moving water around from different reservoirs in the upper basin down to Powell, reducing releases to Lake Mead. But at the end of the day, the existing operating guidelines that we have right now for the entire system expire at the end of 2026. So while we're dealing with this forest fire right now, we've got a larger challenge ahead of us. We've got to develop, concurrently with dealing with this issue, also putting together the next operating framework for the next 20, 30 years. And I believe some of the toolbox that we're going to bring to this challenge, we're going to probably have to build in going forward, be much more nimble and responsive to climate change and the impacts of climate change on our winter precipitation. Like Alan said, and this is a key take-home point that everybody needs to realize, we're getting roughly average winter precipitation each year. Sometimes less, sometimes a little bit more. But our runoff and inflow into the reservoir system is now pretty consistently, significantly reduced. And that has profound effects. When I first started working, we had an average annual natural flow at Lee Ferry of 15 million acre-feet. So up right on the Utah-Arizona border. 15 million acre-feet of natural flow there. Now it's 12.4. So if our demands stay the same, which they have, back when we had 15 million acre-feet coming into the system, but now you have much reduced runoff and inflow into the system, something's got to give. And that's really where we are. So hence this protection volumes effort. Now the states in the United States, tribes in Mexico, we are engaged in a very serious set of discussions trying to figure out how much of water conservation can the states cobble together as a package, along with some operational adjustments that can help address the target volumes that were identified in Alan's presentation. We're not there yet. We've still got some tussling going on between the states and between the upper basin and the lower basin and between the United States and Mexico. But I'm cautiously optimistic that we will get there. We must get there, and I think it's got to be a consensus-based agreement among all of us in the Colorado River Basin. If we don't come up with a consensus-based agreement, we're going to leave it up to the Secretary of the Department of the Interior to implement a water use reduction plan. And I don't believe that will be in anybody's best long-term interests. So stay tuned. The Imperial Irrigation District has been at the table through all of these discussions. All of California's Colorado River contractors are part of our team. The governor's office is part of our team. Secretary Crowfoot, who couldn't be here today, and I'm here in his stead, is part of our team. We're also addressing the any potential additional impacts to the Salton Sea. That has been a separate standalone process between the state of California, the water users, both Coachella Valley water users and Imperial Valley water users, and the United States, because we recognize that's a drop dead for all of us. The sea has got to be kept on a sustainable path, and any potential air quality or water supply impacts associated with water use reductions in the Salton Basin have got to be dealt with through the course of this effort. But the real challenge is going to be reaching an agreement among the 7 basin states, Mexico, and the United States in a very rapid time frame. We've got to come up with something, a framework anyway, by about mid-August. in order for planning for water year and calendar year 2023 operations to be put into effect through the annual operating plan, which means anything that we come up with will need to be ready for implementation as of January 1st, 2023. So that's the kind of time frame we're on. Things are moving fast. It's very fluid right now. But again, I remain cautiously optimistic. And I know we can do this. We've had challenges in the past, whether it was the breach of the levees back in 1905 and the filling of the Salton Sink, obtaining the ability to construct Hoover Dam and the All-American Canal. Those were challenges. It took a lot of time, but we got it done. Same thing with the quantification settlement agreement. California got its house in order and got itself back down to its basic mainstream apportionment. We can do this. We're masters at it. And the conservation that we've done over the past few years, since the 2007 guidelines went in place, this valley alone produced 7 million acre-feet of conserved water supply that then moved over to the South Coast Plain over those years. We also put over 2 million acre-feet of additional conserved water supplies into Lake Mead that kept the system out of shortage for 7 or 8 years. And that benefited Arizona, Nevada, and Mexico, as well as ourselves. So California is good at this. We've always been good at meeting challenges, and we will continue to do that. We're a good partner, and right now we are working well with our colleagues in the other basin states. There's more to do, some heavy lifting that still needs to be done, but I'm cautiously optimistic we will get it done. That's it. Thank you very much.
A big thank you to Chris and Alan. They have a very, very busy schedule, and they were kind to be with us today, this morning. As we move forward to our first panel, I do just want to share with everybody that the focus of the panel will be on the economic engine in the county, the nexus with water, and the potential impacts from water cuts to the valley. This will cover some industry as well. As we get the panel ready to come here before us on some housekeeping matters, to my left in the back, we have restrooms for everybody. We also have some drinks, coffee, pastry, some fruit for everybody as well. So bear with us a couple of minutes as our first panel sets up. Thank you very much.
Curtailments of Colorado River water, allocations to lower basin users are now a reality.
We're going to get started with our first panel now, so if I could kindly ask all of you to please take a seat, we'd really appreciate it.
Yes,
thank you.
Thank you, Becky. So with that, Colorado River water allocations to lower basins are now a reality to the western states of California, Arizona, and Nevada, with ongoing and impending reductions in water allocations and prohibitions on overruns. As we know, most industries cannot survive without a reliable water supply. Additionally, investors will also look for predictable and reliable markets for project and business development. Businesses are important to a community because of its steady contributions to an economy by providing jobs, paying taxes, and the capability to improve the quality of life for the residents of the community in which it is active. In Imperial County, the largest industry is agriculture, which is reported to have contributing a total of $4.3 billion to the county economy in 2019. Another industry that has had a long-standing presence and is very important in Imperial County is the geothermal industry, which is now expanding and expected to lead a new lithium industry for the county. With the foregoing as a backdrop, we invited some representatives from these industries who can provide their perspective on the potential impacts to their industry. And we'll begin with one of our first speakers here. If, Barry Bean, if you would introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Barry Bean, and I'm with BHE Renewables, and we've put together just a couple brief slides to give you an overview on what we're doing and how it pertains to our water usage here in the Valley. So a little bit about us. We own and operate solar, wind, geothermal, hydro, and natural gas resources, and we have a combined generation capacity of 5,168 megawatts. Of that, 345 of those megawatts are geothermal, and I'm sure most of you have heard of Cal Energy. Cal Energy is a wholly owned subsidiary of BHE Renewables. We have 40 years of experience. We've been operating since 1982. We have 10 geothermal facilities here in the Imperial Valley, and those can produce approximately 50,000 gallons of superheated brine per minute. So if you're trying to imagine what that looks like, think of a two-car garage. About the capacity of that is 50,000 gallons. That amount can produce enough energy to power approximately 250,000 California homes. So taking a closer look at our water usage, how exactly do we use water with our geothermal production? Water is used to keep the salts and other minerals dissolved in the brine, and that's ensuring that our resource remains sustainable and renewable. That water remains a part of the brine that is then injected back into the reservoir. We are constantly looking at ways that we can minimize water usage and exploring new technologies to make sure that we're as efficient as possible, to make sure we continue to use water as economically and keeping it very viable for the Imperial Valley and our industrial use. So our current water usage, exactly how much water does it take to power 250,000 homes with our production? You're looking at about less than 0.5% of the county allocated water. So it's approximately 15,000 acre feet of canal water annually. So what about lithium? So we are focused at BHE Renewables on lithium recovery. And what that means is that we are exploring recovering the lithium from the geothermal brine that is already safely and sustainably flowing into our facilities and has for the last 40 years. We have a very small physical footprint, and we use minimal water usage in a closed-loop process. There is also no open-cut mining or evaporation ponds, as you'll see in the next slides. So this is what traditional lithium mining looks like. On the left, you'll see hard rock mining in Western Australia, and on the right, you'll see evaporation ponds in Chile. This is ways that can be very, very negatively impactful to the environment, and this is not what we're doing. As I mentioned in the previous slide, what we're focused on is lithium recovery, and the process of that is recovering the lithium from the geothermal brine that's already safely flowing into our facility. This is a photo of our lithium recovery demonstration facility, and this is where we are currently exploring the commercial and economic viability of recovering lithium. In regards to our potential lithium capacity, it's estimated that BHE Renewables can potentially produce 90,000 metric tons of lithium carbonate annually. And if you're wondering what that looks like in terms of water usage, we conservatively estimate using 1 acre foot of water per 6 metric tons of lithium carbonate produced. Taking a closer look at our future water usage, if we were to expand our geothermal and our lithium production, potentially double geothermal capacity, for example, you'd be looking at an additional 15,000 acre feet of water annually. And the commercial lithium water use is about the same at approximately 15,000 acre feet of water annually. So potentially by 2028, we could be looking at a combined use of 60,000 acre feet of water annually, which is approximately 1.92% of the water allocated to the county currently. So it's less than 2%, and it is absolutely a minimal usage. So taking a closer look at the economic impact of geothermal expansion and also lithium development, what does that look like here for us in the Imperial Valley? So we're projecting that the job generation would be approximately 400 additional jobs with geothermal expansion and lithium recovery. And we're fully intending to hire those positions here locally, and many of those positions will not require a 4-year degree. So this will be something that's going to benefit a vast majority of our county here in Imperial Valley. We also believe that the local taxes from BHE Renewables are going to positively impact the benefits and the development here in the community.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you. And maybe after they're done speaking, if there's any questions in the audience, or if you would like to ask a question now, Barry, maybe it could be a good time to speak. Okay, no questions. With that, then we'll go on with her. Before we do the next presentation, the panelists, Priscilla Lopez from Workforce Development, and then also Steve Benson from Benson Farms. Steve, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure.
Talk about your company. Talk about your company, too.
I'm just going to sit here if that's okay. So many of you know me. I served on the ID board approximately 6 years ago. I got off and been farming since. Our family's been farming down here since the early 30s. We're out of Brawley and very happy to be here. I think what's important to look at this water issue that we're facing right now is how does it affect not only farming but the valley as a whole, and the shift of crops that we're looking at. I think over time the value-added crops have been moving out of the valley. If you go back to the 70s when there was a big push of produce to move to the Yuma area, we actually lost a lot of the processing jobs and things. So what we've been picking up more and more of is the crops that are leaving the Central Valley and coming down here. You see a lot of trucks hauling onions and carrots. Those are continuing to stay here. Sugar beets is the largest contracted farmable crop here with 25,000 acres. And then you see the alfalfa crops and Sudan and Bermuda and a lot of seed crops related to those. So I think just looking at how the water issue is going to affect us, all the farmers are looking at their own fleet of tractors, of workers, of fields, and evaluating what they can grow where with the amount of water they're given. Many of you might not be aware, but this year the IED reenacted the Equitable distribution program. I wish they were here to speak about it, but essentially they allocated water to every gate of every field. A farm is then set up as a farm unit where you take all of your fields. Collectively, you have a number. Say you farm 1,000 acres and you're given 5.8 acre feet, so you essentially have 5,800 acre feet of water to use over those fields. Then it's up to you to make your crop choices in a given year. The sticking point this year is they enacted it in March, April, May, and retroactively went back to January. So a lot of people are stuck with the decisions they made without an EDP now in July, trying to finish out the year, and it's going to change a lot of cropping choices. The corn market has traditionally not been something that we grow down here, but with the high commodity prices last year, also with the high wheat prices, a lot of people put in winter wheat and winter corn, and they're living with those decisions because we have less water to farm for the fall crops. I think that what's also important to just know about our valley is we're completely opposite of the rest of the United States. We plant everything in the fall, farm through the winter, and harvest mainly in the winter, spring. And then our summer crop is generally a short-term crop that can bear the heat, whether it be a Sudan grass crop or something that can really withstand that summer heat down here. There aren't many things that grow at 115 degrees. So I think what we're going to see in the future is some of those summer crops diminishing. You're going to see more fallow fields in the summer. And if we actually get cut on apportionment, that's going to affect the decisions a farmer has to make going forward. One thing that we're all struggling with as farmers is we don't know what to plan for next year. We've been very active in the discussion. There's been a stakeholders group with all three boards Veg Growers, Farm Bureau, and there's an advocacy group called IVH2O, which represents mainly the landowners. They're all trying to understand what the ID's decisions are going forward. It is unclear right now, based on the plan that's been moved around, what's going to happen. I know Yuma, Arizona has put together a plan through their state legislature, and what it all comes down to really is funding. Can we fund conservation at a higher level than we already do right now? It is very expensive to fund conservation. Based on the IID's current on-farm program, they have roughly 80 to 100,000 acre feet that they conserve on an annual basis on farm. So that means you're actually farming a crop and conserving water. With current diesel prices, rental prices, everything else, just to rent sprinkler pipe and put sprinkler pipe in a field, you're talking $500 for the pipe, another $200 in labor. So I mean, you're quickly getting to $1,000 an acre just to put sprinklers out in the field. If you're talking drip tape, the tape costs $400, the diesel costs $200, and then you got to put it in, take it out, and deal with that. So you're quickly hitting $1,000 an acre, and you start to see this $1,000 an acre number really start to just be the cost of doing business. It employs people. It's great for farming. It's great for investment. But we really have to look long term, I think, if we're going to solve this problem. So one thing that the groups have really been talking about is what are some of the long-term projects that we can do here in Imperial Valley, and what really helps us be more resilient as a district and as a group of farmers. You can either be at the field level or at the district level. The district has been focusing on more flexibility, so their flexibility comes in the fact that they went from a 24-hour order for water to now you can have a 12-hour order for water. That helps us because we can move water to different fields or have shorter runs or actually just sprinkle for 12 hours as opposed to 24 hours. Also, drip, you usually run like 4-hour sets, so you can run those across the field. The other thing they're really working on is a system of reservoirs. And this started back in the 80s when the first Metropolitan Water District program put together a series of reservoirs in our valley. The largest reservoir, I think, is not even 1,000 acre feet. So that's, 1,000 acres a foot deep, or shrink it down to 100 acres 10 feet deep. Those are very expensive to build, and they require a lot of forward planning. One thing I would ask of the county and everyone in the room is be supportive of IID trying to do conservation in your backyard. It's not always easy. It's very impactful to build these reservoirs, but I think that we're going to start seeing a lot more system-wide reservoirs, essentially to catch the water as it's falling down from Lake Mead. Just keep in mind, nothing stops the water once it leaves Lake Mead. It ends up in the Salton Sea. So if we're trying to utilize every last drop, we have to be able to stop it along the way. Also, I think on the farm level, what people have been doing is there's been a major investment in sprinkler pipe, in drip tape, in laser leveling. You see laser machines going between all these borders throughout the valley. That was pretty uncommon 30, 40 years ago, but now it's just commonplace. It's trying to utilize every last drop, slow down the flow of water, make sure it gets to where you want it to go. And I think going forward, it's going to be a continual investment with the farm community. And a lot of it's going to be in pump back systems where you're not going to see water leaving fields. It'll be pumped back to the head end of the field. The larger your ranch is, the easier that is to accommodate. And also just the crop choices. I think what we're going to see is a lot of different crop choices going forward. People are talking this year about planting some winter crops that traditionally haven't been planted down here because they know they're low water use. Also, I think we're going to see more crops showing back up, and not only because of the drought in the Central Valley. You might see tomatoes down here fairly soon. You might see other things that might be grown further into Arizona. Keep in mind, we're not the only affected group in the Colorado River and in the state. Central California has already lost over 1 million acres of production, and that's to this year. And if you look at Central Arizona, they're on the Central Arizona project, and they were the first to get cut off last year. So they have almost gone to zero their allocation out of the Colorado River. But they have an opportunity. They can all go to groundwater. What we don't have here is the ability to go to groundwater unless we do some major cleanup efforts on farm or in the system to actually replenish the supply. I think that's pretty much it. Everyone's been very focused on it since the QSA in 2003, and I think we're light years ahead as a county on modernizing our infrastructure as farmers. Not that other people don't also use modern techniques, but they do it more out of scarcity and the fact that they're set up in a system that generally has pressurized water. Because we have non-pressurized water, we have to add that extra fuel to create the pressure to run a lot of these systems, and that's the majority of the cost for us here. So thanks.
Thank you, Steve. So our next person here, Priscilla Lopez, Imperial County Workforce Development Office. Priscilla.
Thank you. Good morning. Priscilla Lopez. I'm the Director for Workforce and Economic Development here with Imperial County. And I was asked today to discuss what our department is doing in terms of preparing a workforce for, in general terms, what's coming down in the near future, mainly Lithium Valley. So I always like to ask how many people in the audience are familiar with the work that the Workforce Board does, or the Job Center, the America's Job Center, formerly known as the One Stop. If everybody could raise your hand if you're aware. Okay, not too many. How many have used the services, whether it's a job seeker service or employment service, employer? Okay, so a lot of the things that we do are here to help the employer, right? So let me tell you just a little bit about our programs on the employer side. The employer can receive recruitment services from our agency. We can help offer a space if you don't have a space to recruit. We have interview rooms available to you. We also have different programs that subsidize employment. For example, our work experience program is for entry-level positions, or somebody who might be transitioning from, let's say, a college graduate who has no experience under their belt, and they would really like to bridge that gap between the practicum and the theory, right? So we would like to offer them, it's not an internship, but it can be viewed as an internship. They don't have the experience, they want to gain that experience, they can go to work for an agency, an employer would provide that experience. The hours run about 700, depending on the skill set. We can increase depending on the job, and it's fully subsidized. So the employer has the responsibility only of training, but they work under the Workforce Board. There's also the OJT, the on-the-job training. That program is also subsidized up to 75% of the wages. The difference between the WEX and the OJT is that the OJT is hired under the employer. So that can run 10 to 12 weeks, also depending on the skill set. That could be any position, so that's also a difference. And it just depends on what they're learning, and there is a retention requirement for that up to 1 year. Up to 1 year, the employer knows if they want to keep the employee on or not. But both allow the employer to free up some capital to invest in either the job bank or to invest in their business. So they're both great programs. We also have the incumbent worker training. So these are trainings available for your employees that are already in your staff. So let's say they need a license or a training that needs to be, they need it for their job. We can help you pay for it up to 90% of the total cost, and that would include wage reimbursement. So that's just 3 of the job services that we provide. All of these things are things that we employed when we sat down to talk about Lithium Valley and what the impact would be for our county. We were asked to convene academia, industry professionals, vocational trainers, our stakeholders, just general partners that could help us put together a program and kind of figure out what an employee needed to get their foot in the door into an organization with Lithium Valley. So it was a great conversation, very robust. Industry was very kind and had a lot of information. And we had Office of Ed there, we had IVC, San Diego State, IVROP, other vocational trainers, CT. It was very well attended. And the result was IVC took it and ran. We've created 3 trainings. They're short-term trainings because we know that people who in the workforce, they want to get their job. They don't want to spend maybe 2 or 4 years training if they can do it on the job. So these 3 positions, we're talking general positions, lab technician, control panel technician, and plant operator. They will be fast-paced, and they were created with the help of industry to kind of drill down to the basic skills component and then furthering their opportunity for training or employment, gathering more skills as they're on the job. So that's been a great partnership. It's worked really well. One of the things that in the workforce, too, that we're focused, I've been a big proponent of academia and helping steer people in the direction of STEM courses, because we have a great need for that here. It's going to benefit our conservation efforts. It's going to benefit our agricultural community, which is the biggest private employer in the county is agriculture, and right under government employees, state, federal, and local, but the biggest private is agriculture. So all of these, there's a lot going on in automation, there's a lot going on in science, and these are things that we're looking at to try to build internships or apprenticeships to help kids in our county want to stay in our county, right? We want to be able to retain our talent and maybe import talent because we want to change the story and the narrative. We want to make sure that these kids that are graduating high school already have a career pathway. They already have something in mind and they can see what's being offered here in the county, and they can see a future here in the county. This is not a bad place to raise your family. We just need to figure out how we can make sure these kids, and the younger we get them in the pathway or in career analysis or research, the better. One of my favorite projects that our agency is doing, that our department is working on right now, is with ICOE, and it is a launch pad, which is a career center in a middle school. We chose Heber, and that project is being worked together with the San Diego Workforce Partnership under the Southern Border Region. And the premise of this job center in such a, in a middle school is because we want to be able to have a child aware of the possibilities. Let's talk about your career. Where do you want to go? Let's talk about the issues in the county. Where do you want to say, how do we get there? And it's career exploration, and it'll benefit the child and it'll benefit the family. So those are just some of the things that we're doing. And of course, how does it affect the county? Well, our job as the workforce board is to look at what's going on in the county as far as industries coming in, development, economic development coming in, because of course it goes hand in hand with workforce. And how can we prepare a skilled, talented workforce for these industries that are coming in? And the water obviously is a big benefit in Imperial County, and if we're losing it, well, the job bank will be affected at the end of the day. So it's all critical and it's all tied together. But our job is to look at the industries coming in and how we can prepare the workforce of our community to be ready for these industries coming into the county. So that's just a few things.
Yep, thank you, Priscilla. So I have a question for Barry regarding geothermal lithium. Let's talk about the big picture. How does water factor into your business model plan, and what measures are you taking to prepare for potential water cuts?
Sure. So, look, we can't provide clean power to hundreds of thousands of homes without using some water. That being said, I'll refer back to the slides that we relatively use a tiny amount of water, less than 0.5% of the county's allocated water, in order to be able to provide that clean power. But we want to be a good neighbor, absolutely. And so we're constantly looking at making sure that we're being a good steward of the water that we are being allocated, and making sure that we're able to use it as efficiently as possible.
Any members of the audience have questions, or panel members here? There's one back there.
How do you identify where to mine location for deposits? I ask because the county has already purchased aerial imagery for this purpose. Also, the USGS has thrown LiDAR across most of the county. And together, the imagery and the LiDAR, the data produce information that produces knowledge for informed decisions where to locate these areas. So, is there a systematic way of where to identify these areas?
Want to answer that, Barry?
Yeah, I assume you're speaking specifically to geothermal, is that right? How we're,
Yes, and not only geothermal, but there's other options. I mean, not just for lithium, but with these data sets, you could identify green energy places. Like, for example, where the best places to site wind farms or solar panel areas.
Mm-hmm.
So the county right now has some of the data that is necessary to make these informed decisions. And along with the USGS LiDAR information, you know, it's going to be quite powerful, actually.
Right. So I can't speak to other organizations, but I can say for our organization, we're absolutely always reviewing that sort of data. We're always taking in as much information as we can to make educated and thoughtful decisions on where we put new or expanded operations. And so there's a lot of pieces that go into that in terms of looking at specific land. You know, we work with a lot of private landowners that are farmers that a lot of times we're working with them, sometimes we're working with the county, sometimes we're working with our own land. And so there's a lot of different factors that go into making those decisions, but absolutely we take into account that data that's available and continuing to look at what are the possible new opportunities of ways that we can advance. Like you said, there's lots of different types of clean energy. And so what a lot of times it comes down to is it both environmentally and is it economically, commercially viable? And so that's what we look at when we're making the decisions of where we're going to place a new or an expanded operation.
If I could extend to that too, you know, so I came on the board in 2011, and from 2011 to now, the board has permitted something like 16,000 acres of ag lands to solar. Altogether, probably about 3% of ag lands in the valley. At the onset, there was, as people would come to talk to the board and either to go for or against the project, they would always talk about put it in the desert, put it in the desert. But this board did act to put some projects in the desert, and as soon as they did, lawsuits came down and it stopped it. So had we put it in the desert, it never would have happened. We never would have had solar here. Let me put something in perspective. And I asked a friend of mine that works for IID. He says, what is the total power generated by Imperial IID to the users here in Imperial County? On a given day, it's about 500 megawatts of electricity. Currently, at present time, the solar, it's generated about 2,100 megawatts. And it's all sent to San Diego County. I've been asked, well, why aren't we benefiting from solar in this county? And the reality is that solar is probably the most expensive energy of natural gas or diesel, even coal. So IID, their generation comes from outside the area, outside the county, and to give users here a good, fair rate. So I don't know where we're going with this in the future. I don't foresee a lot more solar expanding in the county because at the time the board decided that at most maybe we would convert 25,000 acres of ag lands to solar. We're not quite there yet, so the future solar that's coming is going to be involve battery storage. And battery storage will allow energy to be transferred to San Diego in the evening, which is probably the most expensive power. But anyway, it's I don't foresee a lot more solar being created. The solar that is coming will involve battery storage. On the downside, the solar was exempt from taxes. The exemption, though, will sunset in 2024, so 2025 and beyond, we'll be able to receive property taxes on that. And I think it's going to be very beneficial to the county, to the communities, to the cities as we split, the school districts particularly, as we split the revenue with them. So anyway, and the battery storage, the batteries are all taxable as property. Now, one of the things about this lithium that I really like about it, the extraction, the battery manufacturing, but there's also a component called lithium recycling. And the lithium recycling is used for battery storage. They don't convert it back to car batteries. They use it all for battery storage. So I foresee a lot of battery storage taking place in this county, or at least manufacturing of batteries for solar. So altogether, I mean, three main industries coming here: the lithium extraction, the battery manufacturing, the lithium recycling, then also the company that makes the parts for the batteries, altogether creating anywhere between 6,000 and 10,000 jobs. And so I'm really looking forward to that. Any other questions of the panel members here? Okay, well, I guess that concludes this panel. We'll have the next oncoming panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our moderator, Supervisor Ray Castillo, and our panel members. As we move forward, I do want to let everybody know that we will be taking a 15-minute break after the second panel. At this time, I would please invite our panel members to come up and join us, as long as our moderator, Supervisor Michael Kelly. Our second panel will share the perspectives from the ag and community water users. We look forward to a pleasant conversation and the input from our panel members. We'll be ready to go in a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Well, good morning and welcome to the panelists. We'll start this panel discussion with a statement. It is said that without water, the land is worthless. This is not just very true in the agriculture industry in the valley, but also for our municipalities and communities. Water is the core of sustainability. Regional and federal policies are being shaped with a common goal to ensure that equitable and predictable regional water allocation, and no single sector bears the full impacts from water allocation cuts. Undoubtedly, these policies can have a direct and imminent impact on Imperial County's industry and our communities. Further, one can expect the state to bring back and enforce regulations to prevent water waste and unreasonable use of water at a municipal and domestic level. We have invited water users from particular sectors of the agriculture industry and representatives from municipalities and special districts to share their perspectives on this matter. So before we get started, I'd like each panelist to introduce yourself and who you represent.
Thank you, Mike. So my name is Laura Fisher, and I'm the General Manager of Heber Public Utility District. We are a special district here in the Imperial County that provides potable water services, sewer, parks, and trash, along with a few other minor services to the community of Heber.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kevin Grizzle, and I'm a farmer from Holtville, and I'm also president of the Imperial Valley Vegetable Growers Association. So, pleasure to be here.
Good morning. My name is Jack Vesey, Vesey and Company, farmers in Holtville. Mostly we grow leafy greens, majority of what we grow. Good morning.
Good. Thank you. The first series of questions will be directed to the agricultural folks. And the first one is, can you please describe some of the potential impacts these policies could have on your industry?
Okay, thanks, Mike. When you say policies, I'm thinking you're meaning less water, what the policies
Yeah,
exactly?
the potential policies that are coming down the road to ensure that the availability of water continues to be viable.
Okay, great. Well, that's a little hard to predict because we don't have any new information right now. But just looking down the road, I mean, it's clear there's less water in the river system, and it looks like there's cutbacks coming our way. But I want to emphasize that as veg growers, we've been innovating and conserving for years and years, and will continue to do so. For example, more sprinkler systems being used on more crops, being left in the fields longer, more drip irrigation, more land leveling, more control of our TMDL, our silt in the drains, and just being good stewards of the valuable resource that we have, and making beneficial use of every drop of water. So our IID has been a great partner with us. They've been very flexible. They give us 12-hour runs or shorter runs, even 8 or 9 or 10 hours. I've had really good experiences with them, with all our Zan arrows that work on the canals. They've done a great job to turn us on and turn us off when we need to, so we don't spill any water. So they've been great with that. I want to stress that we've all got to get together with the IID, with the county, with the cities, and we'll get through this thing together. It's going to be some more difficult times coming, but we've got to pull together.
Total agreement with Mr. Grizzle. Potential impacts thing that really concerns me is, from what we see right now, I think, we're going to be okay as a one crop system, meaning I could grow a crop of vegetables. I don't really have any issues with what we're going to have on a per acre basis with water. I think the concern is really going to have to happen, especially with the vegetable growers, what you're going to do with the second crop. Am I going to have enough water to grow that sedan crop? Am I going to have enough water to grow the wheat crop? So then a potential impact on our business side is overhead and all the costs that we split over X amount of acres. Are those acres going to be cut in half now? But I think the ag industry has done a heck of a job. If you look over the last 10, 20 years with what we've done with sprinklers, there's some drips starting to come into play. I think working in the future with the IID in regards to inline reservoirs, there's going to be a lot more use of reservoirs, I think, to save and be as efficient as possible. I mean, the good thing is history's on our side. I mean, we are one of the most efficient irrigation systems in the world. So you talked about beneficial use or unreasonable use. There's been study after study, and again, I mean, history shows that we are one of the most beneficial irrigation districts in the world. So the history will be on our side. But the potential impacts of this scary in regards to second cropping for the vegetable industry. And the impacts that we've seen on other areas as well. I mean, water is a huge part of it. But I do want people to understand in the room, I mean, we've been having the battle that we face every day. Kevin is a vegetable grower, we're also alfalfa growers as well. But on the vegetable side, the biggest impact that we see on our business, and I just want to open it up to this a little bit to give you the idea that there's other issues out there, is our main competition is Yuma, Arizona and Mexicali Valley. And with the laws and regulations we're facing and then the changes that have been made, obviously we've made a lot of adjustments and my neighbors and Kevin, and we see what everybody's doing and we're doing the best job we can. But we're losing in a competitive advantage. And the thing that the potential impact would be our rent cost. That's really what's kept us in line with Yuma. It's cheaper to grow a crop of lettuce in Yuma, Arizona. But the thing that keeps us in line is they may be paying $800 an acre or more, or $1,000 an acre on a rent, where we might be an average of $300 to $500 an acre, right? But that's kept us in line competitively. So if a cut in water actually raises our rent prices, as a vegetable grower, that might just take me completely out of competition. I'll be at a competitive disadvantage at that point. So I think that's a very scary potential impact that we may face in the future.
Thank you. You kind of went into some of the other questions that I'm going to ask, and feel free to expand on this if you like. What is your company or organization doing to minimize these impacts, potential impacts?
Well, we're doing the things that we've already been doing, and we're going to continue to do them, is more sprinkling, more drip, and more laser leveling, and more conservation is the bottom line to minimize these impacts. Also, the situation may lead to higher value crops, coming into the valley. If other areas in the southwest are droughted out, then we may see higher value crops coming in, and that could potentially provide some more economic activity. So, we'll just continue being good stewards of the resource.
I think just sprinkler irrigation alone is a huge water saver. We've switched from, we're almost completely what we call 80-inch solid set sprinklers. There's only a few of our crops that will furrow irrigate and flat and not use sprinklers just because they lend themselves more to it. But we've almost completely gone to what we call 80-inch wide bed solid set sprinklers, saving anywhere from an acre to 1 acre to an acre and a half per acre foot of water. So it's been a huge savings, and I think you'll see more and more of that. And a big help has been the IID in regards to the water conservation. Part of that is helping gentlemen like myself and others purchase more sprinkler pipe. It's a huge investment, and you need help to switch into that. If you're a farmer and you really don't have any sprinklers out in your backyard somewhere, you're going to have to make that investment, and that's a big one. So that's what's going to be a big help as we move forward into a conservation mode and being able to get funds to be able to purchase more sprinkler pipe.
Yeah, thank you. It sounds like you guys are a little bit ahead of the game, which is very commendable. Last question for you. How can these water cuts, if materialize, affect your ability to stay in business and keep employment in Imperial County?
Well, there again, it's hard to predict exactly how much the cuts are going to be, since no one seems to know right at this point. There again, I just see a shift to higher value crops. What we'd be looking for, that we can use sprinkler pipe, drip, things like that. Those are the methods we're going to have to be going to. We've got a great selection of crops here. All the leafy greens, lettuce, spinach, broccoli, cauliflower, celery, onions, melons. It's just a fantastic growing climate in the wintertime, and fantastic valley. And there's just so much diversity. And I think we could do a lot more of those crops.
Well, how it affects our ability to stay in business, you say? Well, as we all know, we need to have water to grow crops. And again, as Kevin mentions, the unknown that's really scary at this point in time. As a businessman, you're looking at what capital expenditures to make every year and what you're going to invest in, but not knowing how much water we're going to have makes those decisions very difficult. So decision making has been very tough until we know what's actually going to happen. In regards to staying in business, I mentioned earlier, are we going to be able to second crop? What crops are we going to be able to plant? How much water are we going to have? But I do think, one thing, and we're probably going to get there, but I just want to mention, Laura's up here on the panel, and a few years ago there was some talk about some cities being cut, but I just want everybody to remember that agriculture uses 97 to 98% of the water, and a few years ago a couple ag groups got together. The cities were very concerned, and us as agriculture actually told the irrigation district that, hey, if it comes to it, agriculture, we're going to take care of the cities. We're going to do our part to make sure that the cities have water and the county has water. I may be speaking personally, but I remember there's quite a bit of group that said, everything's going to be okay. Don't get so worried that, I appreciate being up here because we're going to take the brunt of it. But we are going to make sure that, our employees, ourselves, live in town, and we want to make sure they have water as well.
Thank you, gentlemen. Excellent responses. The next set of questions will go to municipal and domestic users. Question 1, what steps have you taken and are taken to address policy decisions that are being made by others regarding water cuts?
Thanks, Mike. So, again, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm not really sure how I ended up being the only municipal or special district representative on this panel, but and I'm going to try to speak for all of them, but our district is a very small district, and I have 1,600 customers. So I have 1,600 meters in our district. So we fall under a very small district or small city category. So we fall under regulations from the state of California, obviously from the Water Board. They regulate a lot of water conservation policies on us. So that's been the one regulating authority that all of us have been having to deal with. Urban users who have over 3,000 connections have much more stringent water conservation requirements than we do, but we all do our part to conserve water and to follow our policies. Here in the Imperial County, as Jack mentioned, the IAD does allocate water for us. In the past, we've had a allocation that had a factor of growth in it. So we had this formula that was fairly complicated, but based on your historic use and then your future growth potential was what we were allocated. This year, I think as Mr. Benson mentioned, there's a new allocation method coming in from the IAD. And I know there's a way for all of the municipalities to have secured water rights. But it's a little different this year on how we are getting those rights. So the IAD has looked at our historical use at the gate. And many of us know that the gates at the IAD, we have our gate open. Maybe we have it open 1.5 inches or 1 inch all year long, every single day, because our demand is very static. Not like a farmer who can call in a 12-hour, 4-hour adjustment of a gate. Our gate remains the same because our demand in our plant has storage, raw water storage. We have potable water storage, so we're able to control our water production. We produce water all the time. Our demand is very static. It's lower in the evening, higher in the summer. Cyclical, but static and predictable because we have a known number of customers. All of our customer accounts are metered. So we have, for water conservation, our meters are our real assets, right? Because we have sophisticated meter system that we read electronically, that we can tell you if you think you have a leak, we can tell you that you have the leak at 2 a.m., so most likely your sprinkler system is breaking. So our customers are getting very sophisticated in how they manage their water use at their home. Our district and most of the municipalities, and I'm sure all of the cities in the Imperial County, monitor that use. We monitor our flows. We check our water loss numbers annually. We make sure they're acceptable. We know where our water goes. So those things are what we do to try to minimize our expanding of water. But what's very concerning for us this year, I think in all of the cities are in this same situation, is how the IAD is allocating our water. And without a meter at the gate, without a meter at the canal gate, it's not an accurate accountability of the water coming into our plant. So currently, just in my district, the IAD is only allocating to our district 2/3 of our historical demand from our customers. 2/3. The rest of the water, they're telling us to go into a clearinghouse to get, which I understand there's water available, and I'm not panicking. Nobody should. But our plant is capable of producing 4 million gallons a day, and our demand is 1 million gallons a day, and IAD is allocating us about 600,000 gallons a day. So we do have some work to do.
Thank you, Laura. Next question. What steps have you taken and are taking to increase your resilience to the effects of the drought, i.e. water recycling programs, and to prevent waste and unreasonable use?
Again, I'll fall back on our meters. It's a very, very good way for us to monitor when there are water leaks and water breaks. That's real important to any community, is managing those situations. For water reuse, our wastewater plant generates about 600,000 gallons of effluent a day. We have a plan to treat that to tertiary secondary treatment where it would be reusable. And we do have an industrial customer, as you know, right outside our door. Ormat is right there in Heber. There's been a lot of talks about putting in a tertiary plant and recycling our waste effluent for that purpose. It hasn't come to fruition yet because our flows are so low that it's not real cost effective. But there is a lot of discussion about that, and that is a possible way to offset some of the water demand from geothermal. And again, we're mandated by the state to enforce some water conservations. I'm sure a lot of you are getting notices at your home. You can only irrigate on certain days. And our meter system to manage our customers. And we do have staff that monitors that, and they can give you a call and let you know that your consumption's high.
Thank you. The last question, what efforts is your agency doing to encourage and/or enforce conservation and reduce the water use?
So I probably already answered this question. The Water Board regulates how we are required to notify, adopt resolutions to mandate water conservation. My district, again, is so small, there's not a lot of demand for us or requirements for us to put out those flyers. And I think the Water Board recognizes that smaller districts like ours, we operate with 13 employees, and we just aren't capable of doing that, and that the consumption that we would save is so minimal that they focus their efforts on large water users and large municipalities.
Thank you. And this is a question to all the panelists. What can the county do, more or less, to help you?
Okay, sure. I think as we go down in the future, streamlining permitting processes for reservoirs, inline reservoirs, pump stations for potential drip systems. These would be permanent installations, so a streamlined process could certainly help there. We need more three-phase power out in the country so we can run variable speed pumps and motors. And so that would be an IID project, but permitting for those kinds of projects would certainly help. Improved roads and bridges, of course, we all know about that. And I think mainly getting together, working together with IID and the county and the cities and the ag farmers and the ag groups is really the most important thing.
I think the coordination, communication, working together is very important. I think in the past there's been a lot of issues, and I'll just be frank, infighting that the outside world loves to see. And I think we need a much better job of communicating and working together. The county also, the permitting processes, as we move on and with conservation money, if we're able to make some investments just to save that water, is going to be big, because we might be looking at maybe some more variable speed pumps right by a power line, for instance. It'll be much more efficient. It'll be a big help.
Laura.
So I agree with Jack and Kevin about working together in cooperation. Again, I'm the only representative for municipalities up here, but I only represent special districts in that regard. And my district is the second largest district in the Imperial County, second to IID, who is a $1 billion corporation, and we are, we have less than 0.5% of their budget. So there's a big disparity, I guess is the word, in the level of representation. So we rely a lot on the IID and the county, the state organizations like Aqua and different water user organizations to keep us abreast of what's happening and to give us and feed down that information to us, because we are so small. But partnering and working together in cooperation is great. These type of forums are very informative for getting the information out to customers that are using water from a tap. So again, cooperation I think is important, and realizing that there are a lot of smaller districts providing the service, and those smaller districts, a lot of them are just on the verge of collapse, and we've seen it happen in the past year. And I know this may not be a water-related issue, but a lot of those smaller districts are providing water to customers out there, and they don't have a big customer base to keep enough money coming in to keep their district afloat. So the information they have on water and how important it is to the rest of the community does come from the county and does come from the IID, and one voice without all the noise of some of the like you said, some of the arguments or some of the infighting helps when you have one voice that comes out and says, this is how we need to work together.
Very good, thank you. The last question is, what can water users and water managers do that they may not already be doing?
Well, there again, I think listening is the main thing. I think disagreement is fine behind closed doors, but when we all come out together in public, we need to be together and not fighting. And we'll pull through this together. That's the only way.
I think on the agricultural side, I think what you're going to see a lot more of is, I think we've done it for quite a few years just because of the crops we grow, is if you want to put a name on it, it's the amount of man hours per acre foot used, water management. I think it's become very important. I think a lot of the agriculturists in the valley are going to be, using a lot more people, hiring more people in regards to just specifically managing that water. We've got a gravity flow system. You've got water coming at you. So the amount of man hours, we've got a lot of irrigation helpers, we call them, on the ranch, that are assisting the supervisors, the water supervisors, to make sure that we're using every drop efficiently and not wasting water. And part of that is watching what's going on, so it takes a lot more man hours. So, I mean, it gets back to also the conservation money and things to help us be able to do that, because it's not, I've gone round and round with some of my customers, my joint venture partners, and from the Salinas area on some of my costs, and I said, we have a resource we have to manage more effectively, so that's a cost that we have to take, and thank you for sharing that with me. But water management is going to be a key, especially in the ag area. I think guys are going to spend a lot more money, time, and effort on managing their water use.
And for municipalities, I think it is managing your water at your meter. And I think for the IAD, it's metering your water, because I think the way they provide the water is very open and subject to calculation or estimation. But for us, we meter it by the gallon. And we're getting it by the acre feet over a gate. And so I think all of us need to really understand what our water usage is from the canal. And I think that's something that, as far as my district, we didn't always track. I didn't really understand that the IAD was not charging me for every acre foot that our district was actually selling out to our customers, because that gate is not measured very well. So I think putting that meter on and understanding where every drop from the central main that we get our water from goes right to our customer tap. So I think getting a better handle on water management, like Jack was saying.
Thank you. What a informative and outstanding panel we have here today. And before we open it up for questions, is there any last comments that any panel member would like to say before we go to questions?
Well, I'd just like to thank the county and the sheriff's office and other agencies that are all involved, but for theft control, for policing, for controlling arson, and the hay fires that we've had. I think the county and the sheriffs have done a great job in stepping up to protect our valley and our assets. So thank you.
Thank you.
My fellow agriculturists and farmers are a very resilient bunch, and I understand people are probably nervous of what's going to happen here. We don't have the answers in regards to what's going to happen yet, but once we do, very resilient bunch that has made many adjustments over the 100+ years they've been farming here, and will continue to do so. So we're always looking to the future. There's still a future out there, and we're going to figure out how to manage it correctly.
Very good. Laura, have anything to say? All right, panel, before we go to questions, thank you so very much. It's very informative. Okay, are there any questions from the audience? Gil, I'll let you monitor who asks the first question, and therefore and thereon.
Just a quick question. So far for Heber, how much of your allocation have you used so far?
So far this year. So I got my allocation a week or two ago. They counted it back from January. So what you're asking me is from January to today. I've used about a little over half of the allocation. So they allocated me 803 acre feet, and I've already used 425. So, it's not enough to get me through our big peak months, which are July and August and part of September, and then all the way through. But again, I will say that the ID has been very cooperative. They are agreeing to recalculate our acre foot based on the data I'm providing to them. And they are very cooperative in working with us to ensure we have our water allocations that we'll need. And yes, we're probably going to have to go to the clearinghouse and pay for it. It's a take or pay. So, and I get that because we meter our customers and we expect them to pay for whatever water they use as well.
Thank you.
Good morning. It's Abraham Campos, City of El Centro Public Works Director, and I just wanted to speak on behalf of El Centro and our water users, and as another municipality and the largest potable water municipality here in our county. I share the same comments that Laura mentioned. We are above that 3,000 meter issues, and the Water Board does regulate how we manage our water. Based on the state regulations, we're already being mandated to enter our Stage 2 water conservation, which has a target of reducing water consumption in our agencies by 10 to 20%. You've seen in our municipality and many other municipalities that are probably going to be following suit, is a reduction in watering days for our grass. We have those same systems for water meters. We do monitor consumption on an ongoing basis. And one very key point to make is the cities are the population, and we use very little water. We're trying to use, we're mandating to already reduce 10 to 20% of the water consumption, which has huge impacts on quality of life. From our parks not being as green as probably going forward as the public would expect, to just forcing down mandates on businesses and commerce to reduce their water, basically stop watering their lawns for commercial and industrial. So on the population, it has a huge impact. And even if we're successful at lowering that 20%, it's less than 0.5% savings as the water in the region. We're doing what we can, and I'm really happy that and glad the county has put this forum together. As we all, I agree, we all need to work together on this. It's an impact, of course, to our farming community and to our residents as well. We have the same concerns with IID and the new water allocations, and what that will mean, not only to just guarantee the allocation going forward. We ran into the same issue as Laura at Heber, where our allocation was almost 30% lower from the water gate from what they measure versus what we measure with our meters that got pumped out. Same issue. We did not monitor that. We were not aware that was occurring. But I agree the IID has been very cooperative in helping us and recalculate that system. So that gets us through next year. There's a lot more work to be done with IID on how we manage growth. At the city level, we're not static in terms of water, in terms of acres as a farming community. If we grow, if there's new industry, if lithium comes in, we need to account on how we account for that additional water in our cities. And that's some work that we're still doing with IID. And again, thank you for the county for putting this together and bringing all the stakeholders to this meeting.
Got one more over here. Hi, panel. This is Lance Hicks from Chocolate Mountain ASR and also Ocotillo Water Company. My question comes as we look to other water sources. At what point does the county, as well as the property owners, as it is a property owner right, look at groundwater extraction, albeit maybe expensive to clean, to use as a resource to put back into the Salton Sea or clean and use as a viable source for farming?
Well, I mean, there is a groundwater plan. Most of the groundwater in Imperial County is brackish water. Like you said, it'd have to be cleaned. And I'm told around the Salton Sea there's one large, huge aquifer that could be accessed to increase the elevation of the Salton Sea. Again, how clean that water is, no one knows, but that is a consideration of any aquifer, whether it be clean aquifer or brackish water in Imperial County, to be utilized, and that is being looked into.
The IID's done studies over the years, for instance, the East Mesa, east of Hopeville, up on the Mesa there on the other side of the Highline Canal.
And so there has been studies done. They've had some pilot projects, poked some holes near the All-American Canal as well. And what you have along the East Highline Canal in the Hopeville areas, there are some projects out there where they're taking some extra, the groundwater, pumping it back in the Highline Canal for reuse. As it moves forward in the future, depending on the water, I'm sure there's going to be some more studies on the East Mesa to see what's under there and how we could use it. But it has been looked at, and I know they've done a few pilot wells out by the All-American, south of the All-American, to see how much water is under there to pump it back into our system for the use of the Imperial County.
One last question. Would it be beneficial for the County of Imperial to look at their groundwater management plan and open that up to R&D, exploratory wells, and what have you, to allow people to do these tests that would further the Livermore test of 2008 and Salton Sea study, which shows us to have 500 million to 1 billion acre feet in the shallow well and 3 billion acre feet in the deep well.
That's a good point, and we are looking into that. We heard from the Bureau of Reclamation today, and I had a question sitting out there, but I was not allowed to ask the question because they were leaving. And my question related to this, he did say that the snowpack and the precipitation has remained constant throughout the years. The only problem is because of the soil being so dry because of climate change, it's absorbing all the water before it reaches the Salton Sea. My question to him after his presentation was, is there any way that you could corral that water, although I love trees and grass, but I love human beings even more, to corral that water and funnel it directly into the Colorado River? His immediate response was that there are just so many vessels and valleys that water melts and goes down to the Colorado River before it gets there. It's absorbed by the sea. But that's just a thought I had. It may be a dumb question, but I'm one that believes, and if you have a question, ask it, no matter how dumb it is. But there's a lot of potential out there, a lot of insight, a lot of imagination that's going to assist the American people in dealing with it, with this drought situation. And we're not through yet, but thank God he said he was cautiously pessimistic about the future water supply for the state of California. Are there any more questions out there? Thank you. One over there and one over there.
Yeah.
Yes, hi. Gary Redfern, Imperial Valley Press. This question is for Mr. Vesey. Just a clarification. You had said that when it comes to water, you're going to make sure that the cities were taken care of. And I wanted to clarify, did you mean just local cities, or are you talking about the larger plan that all cities would be taken care of? And a second part to that, which you don't have to answer if you don't want to, because I don't know if you know the answer to it. It's probably an IID question, but since they don't have anybody here, I'm wondering if we have to cut a certain percentage, would likewise percentages be cut from the water that we're transferring under the QSA and some of the deals that we have with MWD?
On the second one, I can't answer how they're going to manage those transfers, Mr. Redfern. And the first question, I can't do it alone with the cities. I'm sure there's people with varying opinions, but I just recall that there was an issue 4 or 5 years ago. The city of Calapat was talking, they couldn't water their grass, and Mrs. Fisher talked about, the gentleman from El Centro talked about, the parks not getting water, and there was a few of us in agriculture. I remember being in a couple meetings where we talked about, hey, we got to go to the district. There's some way we can assist in this, because again, we use 97, 98% of the water. We don't want to see the city parks dry up. We don't want to see, our partners, our friends, our families The people we work with on a day in and day out basis have to go through that. So I can't do anything, Mr. Redfern, but there's been talk in the past when there were some issues with some cities getting their water and their special water districts having problems that, that there's a few of us, I can't say all, but that would like to see somehow if there's something we could do to help, I think most of us are open to it. Sorry if I spoke out of turn, Kevin. I don't know if you believe the same way.
You did great. You did great. Yeah, perfect.
Hello, John Hernandez. This is for the ag guys. It looks like reductions in the system are here, and your business model is going to change. I mean, it's hitting me right here in the face, and so in view of it being here, and in view of lithium also being here, what is agribusiness looking at in terms of efficiencies, utilizing the technology, innovation, and so forth in the farming industry that could also help, the community as a whole? We know the difference in the water usage in the incorporated areas and the unincorporated areas and all that stuff. But for the future of this county and everybody included, what is agribusiness looking at in terms of including and incorporating the efficiency in all farm equipment, efficiencies, irrigation, with what's coming with the usage of lithium technologies in your operations?
I don't want to talk about in regards to lithium technologies in our operations, but in regards to looking at ag tech and future, I mentioned capital expenditures earlier. I got called by a company the other day talking about a laser weeder. Great, great idea to get more efficient and also bring some ag tech, hopefully higher value jobs to the Imperial County. I asked him for a quote, and the quote was $1.2 million for one machine. You're not efficient running one, probably need 3 or 4 of those machines. And then there's also the automatic thinner as well to become more efficient. Those are approximately $300,000 to $500,000 a machine. Again, can't use one, I'd probably need 4 to 6. So we talk about capital investment, and I'm not sure how much that might save on the water, but just to give you an idea of the ag tech that's out there and how expensive it is and how much money you're looking at, and be able to say, I don't have that in my back pocket, I have to plan, and how am I going to pay for that over X amount of years? And so the unknown is the hard part. I'm not sure in regards to lithium how to tie that together, but we're constantly, and that's the thing, this ag tech deal is really, Kevin probably gets calls, I get calls constantly from try this machine, try that machine, and then you ask how much and you about fall over, but we have to reinvest in our business, and I understand that. But there's a lot of stuff out there. I think, kind of give you an idea, the issue that we do have, though, in regards to these costs, the problem is my industry, and Kevin is a vegetable grower as well. I think the vegetable grower industry, we have an issue because if you were an ag tech, and you had an ag tech company, you got an idea for agriculture, and you're going to use lasers, color eyes, would you set your company up trying to sell it to lettuce farmers or corn and soybean farmers? Well, there's thousands upon thousands upon thousands, hundreds of thousands of corn and soybean farmers, but in the state of California, the western U.S., there's really a handful of vegetable growers. You have a handful of customers. And so when they go out and they design some of this equipment specifically for what we do, to recoup their costs, all of a sudden they give us the price tag on it, and it's absolutely, I wouldn't say ridiculous, it's what it costs for their R&D. And that's the concern, that's the barricade, the barrier that gets us to that next level of ag tech is just the cost alone. But yeah, we're always open, we're always getting phone calls, I'm personally always researching what's the next thing, what's going to help us manage our water. There's equipment out there. But frankly, it doesn't pay. I mean, we're in business. We have to get a return on our investment. I'd love to go out there and I have ranches in mind right now that I'm like, okay, I'd love to there's 4 or 5 fields there. If I level those all at once, put a reservoir at the top end, put all drip, I could save a couple acre feet of water, but that's going to cost $5-10 million to do that. My business, I'd like to see at least, 5%, a 5-year ROI, or, I don't want to be investing something that's got a 20, 30-year ROI. I can't do that. I got cash flow issues at that point. So that's really, that's the thing that's really going to hold us up, is just the amount of capital we have to use to be able to invest in these technologies is a huge barrier right now. And the markets that we play in now aren't like they used to be. Our businesses, years ago, and you guys growing up here, I mean, our markets go like that. But now, it's so heavily contracted with the Walmarts of the world, the Krogers of the world. There really is 5 companies that buy over 80%, well, let's just call it over 70% of the produce of the United States. And they're all contracted, right? So we have this flat line, or market returns. And we don't go, it's tough. We don't have a year where we're like, oh, I gotta buy a $5 million drip system for this field. It doesn't happen that way. But yes, we're starting to put stuff aside and figure out when we're looking at our capital expenditures, planning for the future, going, and part of that now, it's raised up on my sheet here is water efficiency, water use. But again, hopefully that tech price comes down on some of this stuff, because I can't invest in stuff to go broke in 5 years because I heavily invested in some of these things. I need some capital to be able to invest in these, be able to afford these and be able to survive. And you talked about how am I going to survive, and I'm always looking 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, are we going to be around? How do we manage to be around? I mean, I look at it every day that I look in the mirror and I don't think about my family. I think about the 100+ families on my ranch that have been there multi-generational. And I got to make the decisions to be able to stay in business, because if I go out of business, it's not me, it's the 100 people behind us that have kept us afloat, multi-generational, from grandpa to son, to the son that just started working with us. And those are hard decisions to make, because, yeah, there's a lot of things I want to do, but sometimes you get a little too conservative because you want to make sure that you're able to survive as well.
I totally agree, Jack. You're right on it. But I think ag tech is what you're talking about, and I think that's where the jobs of the future are for our young people coming out of IVC or going on to a 4-year. Ag tech has jobs for engineers, computer programmers, welders, fabricators. I think it's a great field for young people that'll be well paid and have a great future. So that's where it's coming. If it's a bit expensive for me to buy, I can't afford one of those machines, but I hire it as a service, so it's tech as a service, because those machines, weeders and sprayers that are running smart eyes and technology, they need to be running every day, like 5 or 6 days a week, so they have to do the whole circuit from here to Yuma to Salinas to the whole San Joaquin Valley to keep going every day, because that's the cost is so high. They've got to run every day. I need it for 60 days, but I can't have it parked in my shop the rest of the time. So hope that answers your question.
Got one more. Gilbert Grijalva, property owner and resident of Imperial County. My question is more, I guess, towards the conservation of. We know the farm industry is the majority user of the water, 97, 98%, but the homeowners and such in Imperial County, we're also being asked to conserve in our way. So our lawns are getting yellow, our gardens are getting a little bit concerning, because our small stuff that we have at our house, our chilies and even cauliflower, are having a difficult time to grow without water. But my question is, are any of you aware of any incentive program that a municipality, water district, or anyone else has for converting your landscaping, your lawn, into a desert look? That way there's less water usage, and I know it's a small amount of water saved, but with maybe 1,000 or 2,000 residents in this valley turn to that situation. Is there any incentive for any municipality or water district to convert into that?
Yeah, so I don't know of any for municipalities locally. I know that sometimes there's funding available from the state if you can, hire staff, or you can run that kind of a program. And I know that sometimes the IAD will have some incentives for rebates if you do put some things in like that. But at this point, I don't know if there's anything available through the state or if any of our cities are running anything.
That's a good question. We all have beautiful lawns, and we're all proud of them. And I guess the only incentive would be the pride that you have in your home. If the water is reduced, then it's to be up to you and your own incentive to make it an attractive desert scape. Any other questions?